For decades, Dwight Yoakam and Buck Owens were more than just collaborators. They were symbols of a revival. Together they reignited the Bakersfield sound, blending honky-tonk grit with rock and roll swagger. When they performed Streets of Bakersfield in 1988, it wasn't just a duet. It was a bridge between generations, between a legend and his successor. But behind the smiles and stage lights, their partnership carried tension, misunderstanding, and years of unspoken words. Buck was the old guard, proud, stubborn, fiercely protective of his legacy. Dwight was the young firebrand, ambitious, outspoken, and determined to do things his own way. Their chemistry on stage hid a growing emotional distance off it. When Buck Owens passed away in 2006, Dwight's silence was deafening. He paid tribute, yes, but those closest to him knew there was something unresolved. A sadness that went beyond grief, rooted in guilt and gratitude. Now at 69, Dwight Yoakam is finally ready to talk. In a rare and emotional interview, he opened up about the real story behind his friendship with Buck, the fights, the forgiveness, and the lessons that shaped his career and his soul. It's a confession years in the making, not just about two country icons, but about pride, pain, and the complicated love that exists between mentor and student. Because as Dwight admits, I thought I was paying tribute to Buck, but now I realize I was still trying to make peace with him. When Dwight Yoakam first heard Buck Owens, he was just a kid growing up in Kentucky, mesmerized by the sound of Bakersfield. It was raw, rebellious, and nothing like the polished country music pouring out of Nashville. Owens's twangy Telecaster, sharp lyrics, and unapologetic attitude spoke to something deep inside Dwight. A sound that felt alive, unfiltered, and real. By the time Dwight arrived in Los Angeles in the late 1970s, country music had moved on, or at least thought it had. Urban cowboy had taken over the charts, and the rough edges of the genre had been sanded smooth. But Dwight didn't care about trends. He wanted to bring back the spirit of Bakersfield, and in doing so, honor the man who created it. At first, Owens didn't pay much attention to the young upstart. Buck was semi-retired, focused on his business empire and his television station, leaving his days as a performer largely behind. But Dwight wouldn't be ignored. He kept talking about Buck in interviews, praising him as the true heart of country music. He covered his songs during live shows and made it clear to anyone who would listen. If there's no Buck Owens, there's no me. Eventually, word got back to Owens, and he decided to check out this new kid who couldn't stop mentioning his name. When Buck met Dwight, there was an instant spark, a strange blend of admiration and skepticism. Owens saw in Yoakam the hunger he once had himself, that fire to make music that didn't just follow the rules but rewrote them. In 1988, the two men came together to record Streets of Bakersfield. For Buck, it was a return to glory. For Dwight, it was a dream come true. The song shot to #1, reintroducing Buck to a new generation and solidifying Dwight's place in country history. On stage, they laughed, traded verses, and celebrated their shared love of the sound they both fought to protect. But beneath that mutual respect, there was also friction. Buck was known to be controlling when it came to business and image, while Dwight was fiercely independent and unafraid to challenge authority. Their personalities, both strong, both stubborn, occasionally clashed behind closed doors. Still, for a time, their bond held strong. They toured together, appeared on television shows, and shared stories about the struggles of staying true to one's music. Buck admired Dwight's relentless drive, while Dwight cherished Buck's wisdom and authenticity. They weren't just collaborators. They were kindred spirits separated by a generation, but united by the same cause. As the years went on, however, cracks began to form. Buck wanted more control over how their collaborations were presented, and Dwight, ever the purist, wanted artistic freedom. Friends recalled how Buck once joked, "That boy's as hard-headed as I am," to which Dwight replied, "Guess that's why we understand each other." Despite the creative tension, Dwight never stopped crediting Buck for his influence. He taught me what it meant to stand up for your sound, Yoakam would later say. Without Buck, I wouldn't have had the courage to make the kind of music I did. Little did either of them know that the partnership that reignited a genre would one day end in silence and leave Dwight with regrets that would haunt him for years. Because even though Buck Owens gave him his blessing, Dwight Yoakam never got the chance to say the one thing he always wanted to. Thank you, and I'm sorry. After the roaring success of Streets of Bakersfield, Dwight Yoakam and Buck Owens became the unlikely poster boys for the revival of real country music. For a while, it seemed like nothing could shake their bond. They toured, laughed, and shared countless interviews where both men praised the other's artistry. Buck called Dwight the most important new voice in country, while Dwight described Buck as the soul of the sound I grew up loving. But behind the scenes, the harmony began to fade. The same intensity that brought them together was now pulling them apart. Buck, who had always been fiercely protective of his legacy, started to feel uneasy about how much attention Dwight was getting. The younger star was everywhere: award shows, TV appearances, movie roles, and the media often referred to him as the new Buck Owens. Buck didn't like that comparison. He respected Dwight, but Buck Owens had built his career from the ground up, decades before Dwight even entered the scene. He didn't want to be remembered as someone's inspiration. He wanted to remain an icon in his own right. Meanwhile, Dwight wasn't interested in being anyone's replacement. He loved Buck's music, but he was determined to create his own identity. As his fame skyrocketed, Dwight's style evolved. He blended Bakersfield grit with rockabilly and honky-tonk, creating something entirely his own. Critics praised him, fans adored him, but some old-school country insiders, including Buck, saw it as straying too far from tradition. The tension came to a head in the early 1990s when Dwight invited Buck to collaborate again. According to those close to both men, Buck politely declined, saying he was too busy. In truth, he didn't want to risk being overshadowed. Dwight, proud and hurt, took the refusal personally. Their communication slowly dwindled until, eventually, they stopped talking altogether. In later interviews, Dwight would hint at the falling out without ever naming Buck directly. He spoke of old friends who let business get in the way of something special. Buck, on the other hand, remained largely silent, though he did once tell a reporter, "You can love someone's talent and still not see eye to eye." Despite the growing distance, Dwight never stopped honoring Buck's influence. Whenever he performed Streets of Bakersfield, he introduced it by saying, "This one belongs to a man who changed country music forever." But fans noticed there was always a hint of sadness in his voice, as if he wished things had turned out differently. Then, in 2006, the news broke that Buck Owens had passed away at age 76. Dwight was devastated. He reportedly locked himself in his home for days, unable to process the loss. Friends said he kept replaying their song together, listening to Buck's voice over and over. In an emotional statement, Dwight wrote, "Buck Owens was my hero, my mentor, and my friend. I wouldn't have had a career without him. We had our differences, but I will always be grateful for the music we made together." It was the closure he never got to share face to face. The man who helped shape his sound was gone, and with him went a chapter of country music history that could never be replaced. In private, Dwight admitted to close friends that his biggest regret was not making peace before Buck's passing. "I thought there would always be time," he said quietly. "But there never is there?" What had begun as a beautiful partnership built on shared respect had ended in silence, and for Dwight Yoakam, that silence would echo for the rest of his life. When Buck Owens passed away in 2006, Dwight Yoakam was not just losing a friend, he was losing a part of his own story. The news hit him like a freight train. For years, Dwight had convinced himself that one day he and Buck would reconcile, maybe even perform together again. But when that call came, Buck's gone. It shattered that hope forever. In the days that followed, Dwight retreated from the public eye. He canceled interviews, skipped events, and disappeared from Nashville's buzzing spotlight. Close friends later said that Dwight spent his time listening to old recordings, replaying their duets and watching footage of their performances together. The laughter, the shared glances on stage, it all seemed frozen in time. In one rare interview months later, Dwight admitted, "There's something about unresolved words that stay with you. I wish I'd told him more often how much he meant to me." His voice cracked as he spoke, the pain of regret unmistakable. As years passed, that loss became a shadow that lingered behind every song Dwight wrote. You could hear it in the haunting melodies of Second-Hand Heart and the melancholy tone of 1,000 Miles from Nowhere. His lyrics took on a deeper sadness, a kind of quiet reflection that only someone who had truly loved and lost could convey. But it wasn't just the loss of Buck that haunted him. It was what that relationship represented. Buck Owens had been the bridge between two eras of country music. He was the living embodiment of the Bakersfield sound, while Dwight had carried that torch into a new generation. Their connection was symbolic, mentor and student, legend and rebel. And when Buck died, it felt as though a whole chapter of country history had closed with him. Dwight began to speak more openly about the emotional toll of fame and the fragility of relationships in the music world. He said, "When you're young and hungry, you don't think about how fast time passes. You just keep running. But one day you turn around and the people who built you, they're gone." Friends noticed a change in him. The sharp-tongued, fiercely independent artist had softened. He became more reflective, more spiritual even. Instead of chasing the next chart hit, he began focusing on legacy. Not just his own, but the legacy of those who came before him. He made sure to honor Buck Owens publicly whenever he could. During concerts, Dwight would often pause before performing Streets of Bakersfield. The crowd would cheer, knowing what was coming. But instead of launching straight into the music, Dwight would look out into the audience and say softly, "This one's for my friend Buck." Wherever he's listening, that simple dedication spoke volumes. It was his way of saying goodbye, over and over each night. By this time, Dwight was in his late 50s, older, wiser, but visibly changed. He'd seen the heights of stardom and the loneliness that comes with it. Hollywood fame, Grammy awards, sold-out tours, none of it could fill the quiet ache of losing someone who truly understood him. And yet, in that pain, Dwight found purpose. He began producing records for up-and-coming country artists, mentoring them the way Buck once mentored him. "If I can help someone the way Buck helped me," he said, "then maybe that's how I make peace with it." In many ways, Buck Owens' passing didn't just leave Dwight with sorrow. It gave him a mission. A mission to protect the spirit of real country music and to remind every young artist that fame fades, but authenticity endures. Still, when the lights dimmed and the crowds went home, Dwight would often sit alone, guitar in hand, playing those old Bakersfield riffs, each note carrying both gratitude and grief. It was a silent conversation with a friend long gone, and a reminder that some bonds, even broken ones, never truly die. As Dwight Yoakam entered his 60s, the sharp edges of his past began to soften. The heartbreak, the silence, the regret. They all became part of a larger story, one shaped by time, humility, and gratitude. The restless young cowboy from Kentucky, who once fought to prove himself, was now a seasoned legend, quietly embracing the wisdom that only comes with loss. Dwight often said in interviews that he had come to terms with ghosts. Buck Owens, Elvis Presley, Merle Haggard, the giants who had shaped his musical soul were all gone, but their voices still lived within him. "You don't really lose them," Dwight explained once. "They just start speaking to you in different ways, through songs, memories, or the sound of a steel guitar in the distance." In his Nashville home, Dwight kept a simple photograph framed on his desk, a candid shot of him and Buck laughing during a break on the Streets of Bakersfield video set. No awards, no headlines, just two men, grinning like kids, bonded by a shared love of music. Friends say Dwight looks at that photo every morning before picking up his guitar. By now, Dwight had accepted that their falling out was part of life's imperfect rhythm. "People drift," he told a radio host. "Sometimes pride builds walls where love should have stayed. But if I learned anything from Buck, it's that forgiveness, even unspoken, can still heal. As the years passed, his music reflected this quiet maturity. Songs like Then Here Came Monday and Intentional Heartache carried traces of nostalgia, but also peace, as if Dwight had finally made amends, not through words, but through melody. Fans noticed. His concerts, once rowdy celebrations of honky-tonk rebellion, had taken on a new depth. When he performed Streets of Bakersfield now, the applause often turned to tears. In 2021, on what would have been Buck Owens' 92nd birthday, Dwight took to the stage in Bakersfield, the very town that had defined both their lives. Under the soft glow of the Crystal Palace lights, he dedicated an entire set to Buck. He spoke quietly between songs, his voice full of reverence. He taught me more than just music. He taught me how to tell the truth, even when it hurts. The audience rose in silence as Dwight strummed the opening chords of Together Again. It was a song Buck had made famous decades earlier, and that night, Dwight played it as if speaking directly to his old friend. When he finished, he simply looked up and whispered, "We're still playing, Buck." That moment became one of the most talked-about performances of his career, not because of its technical brilliance, but because of its raw emotional honesty. It wasn't about fame or nostalgia. It was about closure. Away from the spotlight, Dwight began focusing more on writing and producing. He helped young country artists understand the importance of storytelling, urging them to dig deep into their roots. The truth, he'd tell them, is the only thing that survives. Many of these artists later said that Dwight's mentorship was transformative, not just musically, but personally, and through all of it, Dwight remained humble about his legacy. When asked in a late interview how he wanted to be remembered, he smiled faintly and said, "As someone who never stopped chasing the heart of the song." Today, at 69, Dwight Yoakam stands as one of the last true torchbearers of traditional country music, a man who faced fame, heartbreak, and regret, but never lost his soul. The story of Dwight and Buck isn't just about two musicians. It's about friendship tested by time, egos humbled by loss, and the enduring power of music to heal even the deepest wounds. And though Buck Owens is long gone, somewhere in that Bakersfield night sky when Dwight Yoakam picks up his guitar and plays, you can almost hear Buck harmonizing with him, two voices forever intertwined in the echoes of country music history.